All right. Hello once again, everybody. My name is Bob Turner. This is the Summit Podcast, and I told you I was going to be coming with some great guests in the coming weeks, and here we are. I've got Gary Chupik on here. Gary is from Elite Mindset, and he's got an elite mindset. He and I speak the same language. I'm learning from this guy all the time, and it just seems like a natural to have him on the podcast. We're just going to have a conversation. We're going to kick around a few things. He claims he's going to ask me a few questions, so I'm a little nervous about that. We'll see what happens. But Gary, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Man, you've been doing some traveling. I've watched you. I just had Mike Claudio on earlier today, and I told him, hey, I've watched your journey. I've watched yours as well because I'm always learning. I'm like, I can learn from these guys. Let's see where they go and see what works, see what doesn't. But I've seen you're traveling everywhere. How's that going for you?
Yeah, it's great. It's like you learn by doing, right? Like you can learn theoretically and think, oh, it'd be really wonderful to travel and speak. And on the other hand, if you're always trying to juggle speaking and coaching clients, it means that you're coaching at 7 o'clock at night after you've put in a long day of work. So it's not as glamorous as it sounds.
Right. Well, you're doing the work, right? And I always say, hey, I'm going to be willing to do what others won't. So I can, it's kind of cliche. So someday I can do what others can't, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that, like I said to Wendy the other night, I'm like, well, I'm going downstairs to get on my live. And I said, I don't know if anybody's going to be on there or not. So I'm going down to do it because I do it every week and I'm going to just drip, drip, drip and be on there. And don't you know, there are a bunch of people on there and I had a good time. But there are times when it does become work, right? And how do you handle that when they say, hey, when something becomes, you take something that you love and make it your work, you never work another day in your life, right? I think that's BS because I think it's a lot of.
I agree. I think a lot of it's work. Like for example, I don't like public speaking, which is like most people would say that's shocking. And because I've been on a stage 1,000 times, and you think 1,000 times I would be really good at it, but I don't really know. But it's one of my least favorite things that I do. I do it because I have to do it because it gives me coaching clients or it gives me opportunities in other areas. And so I don't love public speaking is work to me. Now, coaching one-on-one or with, let's say, a leadership retreat or that kind of thing, that to me I really love. But the definitely the public speaking is work for me.
Yeah, it's interesting when we first jumped on before the call, you said, hey, where are you at? One to 10 personally and 1 to 10 professionally. And I was like, well, I'm sitting over here like I'm doing all right. We've got struggles, but and you said, you've got some things going on too, and we just kind of get through it, right? And that's where the mindset comes in. Rather than type up 4 pages of questions like I normally do today, I thought I would just ask you, like, what are you most passionate about right now? What's lighting your fire today?
Well, it's scaling my business. And so I've often thought, like, I know every business wants to scale. Like, I get it. Like, we're all there in terms of people wanting to do better in business and getting more customers and having higher paying clients and that kind of thing.
Right.
But what's really sort of floating my boat right now is knowing that there's a group of people out there that don't yet know me and my message. And so it's motivating for me to want to do more social media and more advertising. And someone once told me that there's a line of people waiting outside of my door, waiting for me to open it. And I think about that as an influencer and as a public speaker. And I just think, yeah, you know what? They're right. And whatever is necessary for me to do to open that door is what I need to be doing. So it's a good reminder that there are people at your door waiting for you. And it's just, if you're not top of mind, you're out of mind in this day and age and culture, especially with social media. If you're not top of mind, you're out of mind. So how do I keep myself top of mind in people's lives? And I don't know any other way to do that except to show up, whether it's socially or in a live setting, and just, your greatest ability is your availability. So it's like, how do I just show up on a regular basis?
Yeah, it's like if somebody goes to first thing everybody does, social proof. You right? Grab. Oh, Gary, I got to check out Gary. Oh, he didn't post since last August.
Yeah, it's true. Like that idea of like, if you're not top of mind, you're out of mind. That is true. Like I've had, I don't love social media, so I'm not. I don't see people as trophies, and so I'm not always posting, pictures with an athlete or with a famous businessman. People are not trophies. right?
Right.
They're just regular people. And so I know I need to be posting more often. It's just hard for me to do. So and it's not my favorite thing to do. But I know that posting on a regular basis does put me top of mind, even
Yeah.
if the content is neither here nor there, or it's
Right.
average, or whatever it is. But top of mind is just so important. I remember there was a few months I thought, well, I'm going to do an experiment, and I just every day I was posting something there for a while, and I got more business out of it. So the top of mind thing actually does work.
Yeah. It's funny, your comment, people aren't trophies. It reminded me, I was in Vegas last October at Ben Newman's boot camp, and I was standing there talking with somebody, and I looked, and there was a guy standing facing this way, the other way, shoulder to shoulder with me for like 10 minutes. And I didn't realize it was Ed Milet. and,
Yeah,
and I said, oh, I got to get a picture. I'm like, nah, don't be that guy. And I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Oh,
exactly. Well, and that's where you and I met, right?
yeah, yeah." And I said, what? I'll just talk to him. And, I don't need to, you know, put his picture on my social media to
Yeah,
somehow advance my standing in the world. It was just kind of cool. I'd rather just chat with a guy, or even a guy like you, and say, hey, what do you know? And what do you know that I could glean from you, and then help others. And I always say I keep my books. I have little black books like this, but any of my notes I write down. And when I have coaching calls and my group calls, I say, hey guys, I'm into my black book, because I don't want things going here and dying in my book, right? I bring it back and I share it. I share it with the community, and I try to help everybody else level up. So,
yeah.
um,
So what about you? What's driving your passion these days?
uh, I feel like feel like I have a little bit of urgency. Like I'm kind of late to this game. I'll be 55 next month, and I feel like I'm just figuring it out. And so wasn't but a couple of years ago where I really just started coming from a place of service, saying, well, help, if I can help this guy, that really makes me feel good. I was on a call with a guy, it's close to 2 years ago, and these guys would just call me and say, hey, I'm going into a tough conversation with this customer. Seems like you have done that stuff before. Do you have 10 minutes? And it would be an hour, sure enough, and I would give my time. But geez, I'd get off the phone and I'd feel like $1,000,000 because I helped somebody. And I said, well, I need to start paying attention to that. So really, it's the more people that I help, the more I get brought along. So I guess really just staying in that lane and saying, well, how can I bring this to others? How can I level everybody else up? I'm a community builder, I guess, by trade, if you will. I'm that guy that says, hey, let's go climb that mountain on the weekend, or let's get a bunch of people over here and do a boot camp. And it's just always served me well. So I guess that would be my answer on that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Don't most of us feel like we should be further along than we are? Like just that sense of
Yeah.
like being behind. It's actually not true, because whatever classrooms that the good Lord has put us in forever, it's like those have been classrooms. They've been necessary for us. And we can look back and say, well, what could I have done if I would have started this when in my 20s or in my early 30s? Like how much further ahead could I be? But it's such a faulty question or statement to make about ourselves, because those experiences have made us who we are today. And I truly believe, like probably like you, I'm 55.
Yeah.
So I truly believe that my best years are ahead of me.
Mm. Yeah. It's funny. Like I think I know your answer. And if somebody asked me, I would say the same. It's like, well, looking back on everything that you've been through, what would you change? And I'd go, not a damn thing, because
Yeah.
it put me right here to be available for opportunities like this. And so I wouldn't change much. Yeah, hey, would I like to known a bunch of things I had to learn the hard way,
Yeah.
and cost me money, it cost me time? Sure, right? But sometimes you got to go through that stuff to make it stick, right?
Yeah. Well, we talked earlier about paying the stupid tax, before we went on air. Like I was in an arm wrestling contest, and why I should not have been. I should not have been arm wrestling at my age. And I paid, it's 2 months ago, and my elbow still hurts.
Yeah,
So, so yeah, wisdom and knowledge is expensive. And that's why mentorship is so important. Like you can get coaching, which is great. I think coaches are great. I'm a coach. I'm also a mentor to other people. And mentoring is just a little bit different. So, for example, the difference between a coach and a coach is someone who may not have had the experience in a particular field. So, think of Bill Belichick from the New England Patriots, right? He's never played a game in the NFL.
right.
He can't do it, but he's a phenomenal communicator and a phenomenal strategist. and he does really well at what he does. So he's a great coach. But a mentor is someone who's actually been there and done that. And to
Yeah.
have coaches and mentors in your life is having a really great team in your life.
Yeah. That's Sage. That's interesting. I like that. Because how many times have you heard somebody say, "Well, he's never done it. What does he have business telling somebody how to do it?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he's never walked a mile in those shoes. Who does he think he is? Right?
Yeah. And
But,
a coach is designed to bring the best out of you.
right.
So he may not have had to have played, he or she might not have had to have played that sport, but they understand enough to be able to teach what's necessary for you to become great.
Right. So many coaches, let's just say, leave it athletically for a minute. They're guys that played the sport and they played it at a high level. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be able to get the best out of a player. Right.
Yeah,
So,
100% true. I heard a story about Dave Stewart. He was a pitcher for the Oakland A's back in the day, really famous pitcher. And one day he shows up at the Arizona Diamondbacks practice facility, and so like all the players are like in awe of Dave Stewart. And by
right.
this time he's probably in his late 50s, and so he shows up and he walks over to the pitcher. This is uninvited. Walks up to the pitcher's mound and starts throwing heat. Like even at 55 years old, he's still throwing better heat than most of the young guys are. And so he spends the entire day just telling people what to do and how to pitch and whatever. And after Dave left, the pitching coach said, "Don't listen to a thing that guy told you." Right? So he can throw the ball and he's great at what he did, but his ability to coach and to teach is not there. So
Right.
just because you were great at something doesn't mean that you're a great coach or a mentor. It just doesn't mean that. You
Yeah.
really do need to know how to bring the best out of somebody in a particular way. So yeah, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you have the chops to teach it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, speaking, been on a bunch of stages, traveling a lot, coaching. What's your favorite thing to do out of all of that? I know you said, "Hey, I burned the boats. I'm all in on this." But if you had to do anything tomorrow, what would it be?
Yeah, for me, it would be group coaching. I love the sense of community of a smaller cohort of guys, and that's my sweet spot. So anywhere between 5 people and 50 people is just kind of my sweet spot. So I love that environment. Now, that is my favorite environment. And then above 50 people, I'm not crazy about until it gets to about 500. Then after 500 to thousands, I'm perfectly comfortable. But for whatever reason, and I don't know why, but for whatever reason that 50 to let's say 250 is uncomfortable, and it's just getting to be on stages and recognizing and noticing myself and noticing how I feel and reflecting upon how I feel about things. Like there's a difference between ruminating and reflecting, right? Ruminating is when actually the word ruminating actually has its origin in Latin with animals that have two stomachs, and they'll keep chewing on something. And oftentimes we as performers, we ruminate on stuff. So we keep chewing on a
Yeah.
problem or chewing on a deficiency or something that's not going right. And we ruminate on it instead of reflect. And reflect means to bounce back from a surface. So that idea of reflecting, just think of a mirror, right? The
Yeah.
image is bouncing back to us. And so this idea of like, okay, I got to reflect on what environments I do my best at and then try and put myself in a position to be in those environments. It's not so much about how well I can adapt, although that does play a role in it, but mostly it's what kind of environments do I just excel at and just try and stay in that lane and do that as much as I can.
Yeah. That was kind of led to my next question is like, what are you seeing as a deficiency out there? You see a ton of people, you're into mindset, is it leadership? Is it, you're in the sports psych area too? Like what, what do people need more of?
Well, this is going to sound really counterintuitive, but nowadays it's almost like what do they need less of?
Hmm.
And let me explain. So I think thoughts are like calories. And so one of the common themes that I hear among professional athletes and people in business is I have too many thoughts.
Yep.
And in a way it makes sense is if you see them like calories. If you have too many calories, what happens to you, right? Too many calories that you can't expend, you get lethargic, you slow down, right?
Mhm.
In the same way, if you have too much information that you can't expend on a daily basis, even if it's good information, and
Right.
that's the really crazy thing. Because I mean, listen, you can eat, a 5-gallon bucket of Brussels sprouts if you want to, or eat a ton of steak and still feel sick, right? So even if it's good nutrition, you can still have too much of it that you can't expend. So figuring out in terms of the type of, no, well, not just the type of information, but just information in general, is how much information do I really need to feel safe moving forward or to be at my very best? How much information? Because I find that most athletes say I think too much.
Yeah.
And if you're going to think too much, what it does is it slows you down. You become hesitant. And I've never known a confidently hesitant person.
Right.
There's only confident or there's only hesitant. And in the world of sports, hesitancy will cost you everything. I was working with a defensive tackle in the NFL, and he said, Gary, can you make me 2/10 of a second faster? That's all that I want is 2/10 of a second. And if I become 2/10 of a second faster and I can remove that hesitation, I will absolutely crush it in the NFL. And by the way, he was on the team starting defensive tackle on the two best uh, NFL defenses this past year. So
Yep.
he knows what he's talking about. He just needs to get 2/10 of a second faster because then it leads to more disruptions and more sacks, which leads to a bigger contract, which leads to potentially a Pro Bowl. And if he gets in the Pro Bowl, there's a clause in his contract that gives him an extra $1 million because he made it to the Pro Bowl.
Right.
And all of these things, I keep asking him, like, and what would that do for you? And what would that do? What would a few more sacks do for you? What would a few more hurries do for you? What would a few more, what would the next contract do for you? What would making the Pro Bowl do for you? And you know where it ended? It ended with, I'll be able to buy my mother a house.
When you got to the,
And,
yeah, you
and
got,
so, yeah. And so, like, Simon Sinek says, start with why, but you can start with why, but you know what you finish with? You finish with a who.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
who is this? Who do I want to succeed for? And you can try to succeed for yourself. I mean, that's totally fine. But
Right.
it gets really emotional when you want to succeed for somebody else. So start with why, but end with who.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. How long you been doing this?
6 years.
Yeah.
It was kind of a crazy story to get to where I am. I was an ordained minister for 27 years and had a burnout, and I call burnout a self mismanagement.
Yeah.
And I mismanaged my energy levels. Like we talk about time management, but we very rarely talk about energy management. So I mismanaged a lot of my energy, and then I had a midlife crisis. It was either like, buy a Camaro or rethink my future. and so I decided to rethink my future, and I thought this is a unique moment of my life in my mid to late 40s, and I thought, if this is my midlife crisis, let's use it. Like, let's make it valuable. And so I remember putting up on my walls all these sheets of paper, and it was like a John Madden screen. Like I had X's and O's all over the place. Oh, all of that. And I was trying to figure out my life. Little did I know that I was creating a blueprint for what I do now. And so I do something called the Game Plan for Life. It's a 2-day experience that people will fly to Seattle to spend with me, or they'll fly me to where they are to spend 2 days with them. And I figure everything out in their life in 2 days. And so they spend the rest of their life just executing, but they never have any more questions about their purpose, their calling, their identity, their vision, their personal philosophy, their plan to execute everything. That is never in question for the rest of their life. I figure it out for them. And I mean, why waste all this time trying to figure out what you should do with your life? If you knew exactly what to do, how much further and how fast can you go if you know exactly what you need to do? And so it's part optimization tool, it's part vocational tool, like what are my next steps in my life?
Yeah.
And it works like magic. So it was in that dark time. I shouldn't say dark, but quiet time of my life when I was trying to figure me out. And then I created the Game Plan for Life. And then uh, I ended up actually going on a blind date, so to speak, with Trevor Moawad, who was Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Denver Broncos and Seattle Seahawks at the time. And I ended up meeting his mental performance coach, Trevor Moawad. Trevor took me under his wing for about 18 months and just really taught me everything that he knew. And then finally he said, well, why don't you just branch out on your own? You have everything that you need. You're good enough to do this. And I had put in about $1,000 of study into sports psych, and I have a master's degree in teaching and education. So it was just a good fit. And I grew up an athlete. So not a very good one, but I grew up an athlete and put all this together. So I had a playbook for the mind and a game plan for life, and it would just sort of fit together. And so now I travel around the country talking about mental performance and how to live what I call whole life excellence. You don't, back in the day, a lot of guys would sell out for one thing, whether it was Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or whoever it is. And I'm not picking on those guys, but they're just recognizable names. But I think the days of being excellent at one thing at the expense of everything else, I think those days are over. We have to be done with them, because if you're a train wreck in 8 different domains of your life, but you're successful in one, that to me is not a successful life. Honestly, Bob, you and I, if we wanted to be millionaires, we could go be millionaires. If that was our sole number one goal, was to be a millionaire, we'd go do it. But the challenge for us is to manage and balance all the different domains of our life so that we're succeeding at all of them. And that's why I'm a true believer in identity-based mental performance, so that we can achieve whole life excellence. And it's possible. Like, don't let anybody tell you that it's not. It is totally possible. So I'm a big believer in being good at everything.
That's cool. I often will think about that, like you said, being a millionaire. You see these guys that are successful, but you look behind them and there's a trail of bodies.
Exactly.
Right? When I get there, I want to be able to look behind me and see the people that are brought with me.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. And if you can be, like, for example, if you're great at one thing, but you're embarrassingly terrible, you're a dumpster fire in another, to what credit, what credit is that to you?
Right.
It's really not. It just means that you were really myopic and driven in one area, but it was at the expense of everything else. And that's not the kind of life that I want to live. And when it comes to, let's say, my marriage or my kids are in their early 20s and mid 20s right now. And, if I'm a failure as a father, but I'm, one hell of a mental coach, that to me is not success. And if that's what it is for you, then good for you or somebody else. But that's not the kind of life that I want to live.
Yeah, that's a big fat F if you ask me at life,
Yep.
right?
Agreed.
And I was just saying in the last podcast with regard to family or your immediate family, this is what you signed up for, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes, if I'm on a podcast or I speak or whatever, I'll introduce. First thing I say is, "I'm Bailey's dad." It sets the tone, because truly everything else after that, I can fix all that. Like business or house or whatever, all that other, it's just stuff. Right. So if you're not settled with that, you don't have your head screwed on right with regard to that stuff, you're starting from behind the 8 ball, if you ask me. So
yeah. So what about you? When did you have a renaissance or a moment or a season of your life where you started pouring yourself into personal development and saw the value of that?
yeah, actually, I was 2021 when I went out to Denver to a contractor fight event, Tom Reber's group.
Oh, yeah.
And it's called the Mile High Profit Summit. And there were 2 things. There was, like, I was sitting in the front row, and it was all, one guy was talking about sales, and they had this program they call Shin Fu sales training, and it's unique to them, and it's cool stuff. And I was looking at it, and they said, "Oh," and I go, "Oh, this is sales training. I've got plenty of work." And what I didn't realize is I had never had any sales training, and I was okay at it. But once I came home and started working on it, I was like, "Oh, there's something to this." So I think that's what kicked off kind of the realization that, for lack of a better term, I don't know everything yet, right? And that I can still get better. And here I was at age, 51, going, okay, we're still just getting started. And then in the process of being in that group, guys would reach out to me, like I said, and they, "Hey, can you help me?" I'd be like, "Okay, sure." And it felt good. And I used to do some coaching with my triathlon exploits and try to help people across the Ironman finish line. And I'd write training programs. And I just have always enjoyed sharing what I know, right? Probably could have been a teacher, probably should have been in some fashion. But I didn't. And I think it was about that time when I started to realize, okay, this is really what fills my cup, not to be cliche, but this fires me up. I get excited about this. Like, I like the game. I like figuring stuff out. People, I'm like, "Hey, you got a tough thing to deal with a customer or a client or a subcontractor? Bring it. Let's go. I want to, let's talk about that. And let's talk about the different ways that we might be able to navigate that." And so it's fun. And I like sending the guys off with, "All right, try this, this, and this. And it was one time the guy called me and he said, what do I say to this guy? I said, say this, and then he's going to say this. And he'd call me back. He goes, son of a gun, the guy said exactly what you said he was going to say. I said, dude, I'm old. All right. I get it.
Right.
But
Right.
I think it was just about that time. I never really realized that you had a choice about how you showed up in life and in people and how you presented in conversations. And I guess maybe I'm just a late bloomer, whatever. But I'm all in now and learning as much as I can. I'm a sponge. I'm reading as many books as I can and getting around the right people. And that's meant like being not around some people that used to be around, used to hang out. Not bad people, just not going where I'm going. So I'm kind of a lead follower, get out of the way guy. I'll lead if you need me to. I'll follow a good leader, but I'm not gonna follow a bad leader.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
that's
tell people I'm self unemployable, because I have to, unless I'm going to work with someone who's a high level leader that has my trust because they exhibit character and integrity. Most people can't do that. So I'm
right.
not a good follower for those kind of people. So it's hard for me to follow other people. So it's kind of one of the reasons why I started my own business, is because my standards are so high,
Right.
and I want the people around me to have really high standards too.
Yeah. I mean, it was a while before I won't say I expect less of people. I always was expecting as much of everyone else as I did myself. And it took me a while to realize that, hey, not everybody's
Yep.
looking to hit a grand slam every day, Bob. Not everybody's showing up all fire and brimstone and ready to rock and roll every morning. And Wendy gives me a hard time. She goes, you wake up in the morning and you're like, hey, what's going on today? How you doing?
Yeah, well, I tell people, like, you can have weaknesses. There's only two places that you cannot have weaknesses, right?
Yep.
You can't have a deficiency in character, and you cannot have a deficiency in integrity. Everything else, it's pliable. Like, you're right. Not everyone's going to hit a grand slam every day, but on the other hand, we just can't tolerate, character and
Yeah.
integrity issues.
Yeah. I don't want to I don't want to be around it. And in fact, Mike and I were talking earlier about just like thinning out even your social media followers of people that puke negative on their page, your page. It ends up on your desktop. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't want that. Get that away
yeah,
from me. That's not what I'm doing.
yeah.
So yeah, just kind of like I've always been pretty positive, turn a negative into a positive kind of guy. And I think that another moment when I realized maybe I should be doing something in this area was when I started writing a blog about all my race exploits and all that. And it was more like race reports, right? And I would write like I spoke, just kind of dot, dot, dot and capitalize this and emphasize that. And ran into somebody in the grocery store one day and they said, hey, I read your blog. And I'm like, whoa, really? I didn't know you read it. You've never commented. No, I read them. How come you haven't written one in a while? I really enjoy it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Wow. So that was the old, if I can affect one person, like, hey, I didn't give up on what I was doing because of what you wrote. Like, oh, impact. Okay, maybe I've got something here. And so it really started to open my eyes to the fact that I enjoyed helping people, that I'm suited for it, and I'm good at it. So let's go. So here I am, just
I love
availing
it.
myself to the process and going hard at it.
Well, you're taking some risks and you're taking some action steps. And, taking an action step is better than reading 20 books,
Right.
because you'll learn more taking that one action step. And you can always course correct along the way, but you're going to learn more in that taking an action step than the 20 books.
Well, case in point, I started the podcast over 2 years ago, and it's just I started out, hey, ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and I was really looking just locally, right? And I'm that guy that hey, I didn't bug Ed Milet, right? So I don't know if I'm ready to ask Gary to be on my podcast. So maybe Mike Claudio. I don't know. He's like 1,000 deep. I don't know if he would come on my podcast, but I asked.
Yeah,
And the answer very quickly, sure, let's do it. I was like,
exactly.
Okay. Right. And so you don't know till you ask. Shoot the shot, right?
Yeah.
Make the play. And what's the worst that can happen? No. Well, if it's no, what do I need to do to make it a yes? Okay. I'll go do that. I'll be back.
Yeah.
So,
There's a book called Rookie Smarts. It's a
yeah,
great book. I recommend it. Rookie Smarts. And
he's
it's
smart.
about players who professional players who, let's say, they've never really played in a playoff game before, or they've never played, or maybe the star player got an injury and they get forced into a game, and
Yeah.
they don't know that they're not supposed to be good, and so they go out and they play great
Yeah.
because like they don't even know what they're doing. They've never done it before, and all of a sudden they're placed in these big moments and they succeed. And so
Yeah.
this idea of being a rookie at something, it actually gives you an advantage in many ways because you might not realize the pressure that's on you. You're just going out and playing, or maybe you bring something creative or something different to
Yeah.
the table than the veterans bring. And as a mental performance coach, I like to study momentum and why momentum happens and how to create momentum, because when a team has momentum or a player has momentum, man, they're on fire, right? It makes a huge difference for the team and oftentimes leads to wins. And so the science of momentum is actually something that I like to study. But one of the things that I learned is that in terms of momentum, how do you create momentum? Well, in sports, is somebody makes a play.
Right.
That's what it is. Somebody makes a play. It's
Yep.
an action, right? It's not, somebody barking in the huddle. It's not a strategy. It's somebody makes a play. And it's really interesting because in the NBA or in different sports, it doesn't literally doesn't have to be the star players the on the on the surface of the playing surface. It could be like the rookie. It could be someone who you wouldn't expect. It doesn't matter. Momentum doesn't judge those things. It
Right.
just happens. So everybody on a team can make an unusual play. And so the question for us is, if we want momentum in our business, what kind of unusual play can you make? Like, what is the extra step that you can
Yeah.
go? Like, I know a guy who's a plumber, right? And he's like, cleaning toilets, in the bathroom, in addition to the actual work that he's doing,
Yeah.
but he's actually cleaning a toilet and making the bathroom smell really fresh. It's just, he's making a play, right?
Right.
And the customer really responds to that. So it's like, even if you're a rookie at doing whatever you're doing, whether it's a podcast or whether you're in a sport or in business, just go make a play and you'll have momentum.
I love it. I've taken more notes on my two podcasts today than I ever have. That should tell me something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Normally I'm firing questions out, but today I just decided to just have a couple of conversations, and that's been fun. It's been really fun. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll ask you, this is a selfish question, one for me, advice for me. When you were first starting out looking to get more speaking engagements, how did you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in a lot of ways, you can, like, a lot of life is going uphill, right? Like, and into the wind, like you're climbing stairs,
Yeah.
and it's just hard work, and you have to really make sure that you're good at your craft, whatever it is that you're doing. I find that relationships are the elevators.
Hmm. Okay.
So, and the way that you create those relationships are being in the right rooms. So, for example, if you and I meet in October in Vegas at Ben Newman's event, then you're in a unique room with a unique group of people, and
Right.
those relationships propel you to different heights. Sean Kelly is a podcaster. I don't know if you've heard of Sean Kelly. He has, I think, 11.5 million followers on Instagram. He had the number one podcast in America on Apple iTunes in the personal development category. I was just in Vegas a couple of weeks ago talking to him, and I said, "Listen, let's assume that what they say about your talent and ability is true. Like, you're a good guy, you're good at what you do. Let's lay that aside." And this was my literal question to him: what percentage of your success would you attribute just to being in the right rooms? And you know what he said?
50.
80%. 80%. Now, he's a humble guy, right? He's a humble guy. He's not going to tell you how great he is. I'm sure he's very good at what he does. But 80% of his success is just being in the right rooms. And I would say, when it comes to, public speaking and opportunities like that, most of it is just being in the right rooms. And so what is it? Like, for example, like, one of my favorite sayings in sports, I tell this to athletes all the time and people in business as well, because 50% of my work is with sports and 50% is with business. And here's what I like to say is that you can never control an outcome. You can't. You can throw the perfect pitch and it still get hit for a home run.
Yep.
Okay. You cannot control outcomes, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed.
Yeah.
So, what is the best position for you to be in? And being in the right rooms is a great position to be in. You
Yeah.
can't control whether someone hires you or not. You can
Right.
give, you can give out, you put in a bid, but so do three other guys, right? You're just part of the bidding process. You can't control the outcome, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed. And one of the ways I think we can do that is to understand the difference between a feature and a benefit. So a feature is something that's unique to your program or unique to your business that you do specifically. So that's a feature, right? Like
Yep.
think of a car. Like here's all the features of a car, but
Yeah.
the benefits are different when you buy a truck as opposed to a car. The benefit is that you can haul stuff.
Right.
Okay. You can haul stuff. Or if let's say I'm selling my coaching services, I'll say, yeah, these are my features of what I do. But the benefit is I'm going to give you access to me 24/7. Okay.
Mm.
You can call me anytime. I'm going to pick up if I can. And if I can't, I'll pick up and call you right back. I also am a professional strategic planner for businesses. Right. And so as we're talking and maybe you're doing a game plan for life or you're getting mental coaching from me, I also know how to strategic plan for a business. Okay. So that's one of the benefits that you're going to get. I've been a leader for 28 years. I've been in leadership positions, both locally all the way to nationally. So you're going to get a lot of leadership stuff. So I have a lot of benefits, or there's a lot of benefits to working with Gary Chupik as opposed to my competitors. And my competitors are great. Like I don't know their benefits, right? I know they have lots of great features and many of them are excellent at what they do, but the difference between features and benefits. And so I think a lot of it is just being in the right room and offering not just features, because everybody can coach, or a lot of people, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people can coach. But what are the benefits of someone hiring you to do what you do? And if you can sell the benefits as opposed to the features, I think it puts us in a better position to succeed. Can't control the outcome, but we can control whether we're putting ourselves in the right position.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Um, I always ask this question. One of the things I'm building out and building around is the edge. My online community is called The Edge. and I'm helping people find their edge. Okay. I didn't prep you for this, but I'm not the least bit worried about asking you this question. What's your edge? How do you show up when the chips are down? Where do you go when the proverbial shit hits the fan? What do you feel like your edge is?
It's interesting. There's two thoughts that I have. Number one is there's something that I tell myself that is non-judgmental whenever the shit hits the fan. And that is just three words. It's a phrase I tell myself on a continual basis. And that is, Gary, just come on back. Come on back to what you know is true. Come on back to what you know is good. Come on back to what makes you successful. So instead of overcompensating, I just say, Gary, just come on back. And so it means that you have a rhythm, a pre-existing rhythm or a habit pattern or something like that. But it's just come on back to that, right? So that's the first thing is like, don't be self-critical.
Mhm.
Don't judge myself. Don't shame myself. Just
Right.
come on back. Just come on back. It's an invitation for me to return to what makes me successful. So that's the first thing. And I would say the second thought that I have is, and it's actually one of my keynote speaking outlines, which is know who you are. That's the first thing. Everybody who's really a high performer knows who they are really well. They're experts in themselves.
Mhm.
So know who you are. Number two, know what you want and why you want it. Know what you want and why you want it. Because if you don't know what you want and why you want it, you'll always hesitate. And success loves speed.
Yeah. I like that.
Success loves speed. So know who you are, know what you want and why you want it. Remember, it starts with why and ends with who. And here's the third thing is you got to figure out how badly you want it.
Right.
Because if you don't know how badly you want something, you won't make the sacrifices necessary for you to be successful at that thing. The
Good
word
point.
passion in Latin means to suffer. We talk about it in terms of smiles and flowers and do your passion, right? No. This whole passion thing in Latin means to suffer. So what are we willing to suffer for? And if you got to love something enough to suffer for it. And if you're not willing to suffer for it, you don't really love it.
Right.
You don't. It's like your spouse, right? If you really love your spouse, you will suffer for your spouse,
Hmm.
and we do.
Yeah.
So I think this idea of identity, knowing who we are, knowing what we want and why we want it, and how badly we want it. Listen, you're going to have to put in the work. Like, I'm old school and new school. The old school stuff is put in the work. The new school stuff is go learn all the fancy, strategies that you can, and the new technologies and the AI and this and that and the other thing. But the old school is, you just better get to work, and there's no substitute for that, right? So I think in the end, I think it's really about knowing who you are, what you want, and how badly do you want.
Good stuff. I'm glad I asked. I always ask you, what's your edge? And I'm getting some great answers. Um, this has been great. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time. Before we go, what would you like people to know?
Well, I would like everyone to know that they can have a game plan for their life, and they should have a game plan for their life. I was so shy about saying that for so long, but there was a circumstance that changed my mind. So there was the president of the Houston Texans of the NFL, was one of my clients, and we were going to do a game plan together in Houston. And this was a few years ago. And so he was flying me out to where he was to do this 2-day game plan. And so, we had been talking about it for months. And so we had a date on the calendar, and we were 3 months, 2 months, 1 month. We were connecting every month. And then about 2 weeks before my flight, and I was going to go see him, I hadn't heard back from him. And then I texted him again that week. And then I called him a week before, and there was no answer to his phone. And then a couple of days, I was like, well, I got to know whether I'm coming or not. I haven't heard anything. I can't just fly out there and him not be available. So I was very confused. So finally, I called the Houston Texan front office, and they told me that he had committed suicide
Jesus.
2 days before we were supposed to do a game plan for life. And I thought to myself, now, I'm not the good Lord. I'm not the higher power being, whatever. I There's a part of me that just wonders, had he have had a game plan for his life, would things have turned out differently?
Sure.
Had he have known exactly who to be and what to do in his life, could it have turned out differently?
Right.
It's not for me to answer those bigger questions, but it makes me wonder. And so he had never indicated that he was going through depression or had some type of substance abuse, and I don't know what happened to him. So I'm not insinuating anything. All I'm saying is I don't trust anyone anymore. If I ask them if they're doing okay, I don't know, unless they're transparent and vulnerable enough to tell me.
Yeah.
And so now I'm not shy about saying, man, everybody needs a game plan. And if
Yeah.
you don't have a game plan for your life, you're just wasting time and wasting energy and wasting resources. Because everything in your life, from your identity, your purpose, your calling, your vision, your current assignments that you're doing, your personal philosophy, all that stuff, you can figure out so quickly. It's based on your identity. You can figure it all out. But or you can spend the rest of your life trying to figure it out.
Mm.
And I think that's just wasted time, because you could be spending all of your time on execution. Instead, you're staying in the question phase, and it's causing the hesitancy and the confusion. And so if I would say, what do I want everybody to know? I would say, go figure you out
Yeah.
and know what your game plan for your life is, and go attack it. Go chase it. It's life changing. Mic drop, pen
Mike.
drop.
Good stuff, man. I appreciate it. This was cool. This was fun. I got a couple of pages of notes here, and it occurred to me, hey, you can just watch it on rewind. But I didn't want to miss anything.
Well, nowadays you could hook it up to AI and it'll take notes for you too,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm a note taker, so I
Me
write
too.
down impactful things, and it seems like it solidifies it in my mind for me. So,
Yeah, me too.
dude, I thank you for taking the time. This has been great. Safe travels for all that you're doing. I know you said this time of year is a little bit slower for you, but I'll put your contact info in the show notes, as they say, so people can get a hold of you if they like. And I'll put this on Apple Podcasts and YouTube and all the stuff. So it's great. I appreciate it. guys, this has been the Summit Podcast. Gary Chupik, super pumped to have him on. Lots of nuggets on this one, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being
Yeah,
on.
thanks for having me.
Shit. All right, take care. Stick around. I'll catch you in a second.